Hi, welcome to the Drama Free Living Podcast. It's Dennis and Lisa McIntee. And today, Lisa, we want to cover an idea that I think is sort of like a leadership fatal flaw. Yeah, just kind of thinking about it. One of the leadership fatal flaws that I've seen, maybe that I've kind of fallen into, and also other leaders do, is when you're not able to regulate your emotions.
Yep.
Right? It's like something happens and you just blow up. And then you got to go take care of the blow up before you can ever get back to the issue. Right? You throw up on people. I'm glad I've never thrown up on you. I see that face, right? Yeah, it's like when
I didn't even say anything. Did you see that? I just regulated my emotions, and
I knew you had 100 things to say.
I just breathed through it.
Well, it's like we throw up emotionally on people, and then we got to go clean up the throw up before we can ever get back to the issue. So I think it's a really, we got this emotional regulator that we want to talk about, a quick thinking tool and exercise, but it's really why we created Emotionally Intelligent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, it's the flagship product that really helps people regulate and manage and use your emotions for good. Actually use them to drive you forward instead of like hinder you and hold you back.
Absolutely. Because if you are the CEO of a company, or if you are a manager and you have a lot of direct reports, there are things that you need to communicate. There is business to be done. And if you are frustrated and irritated and you let those emotions out onto your people, then your people have to spend the time cleaning up that emotion and that mess rather than just getting the job done. And ultimately, isn't getting the job done what we want? I mean, isn't that what we want our people to do instead of cleaning up our emotional mess or dealing with our emotional baggage? I mean, really, when it comes down to it, that's speed of business.
Yeah. And what I love is we're going to show you a tool here in just a minute that you can use with yourself, but you can teach it to other people.
Oh, it's so easy.
Oh, and you can totally regulate like some of these emotions. And so I'm excited to we've never really talked about it before. So I'm excited to kind of dive into
Absolutely.
it.
So when we were talking about the emotional regulator, which we totally love, I was kind of digging in and I started geeking out, and I discovered—
Like always.
I do. I kind of geek out. And so Dennis and we used to watch this show called Lie to Me.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Do you remember that show, Lie to Me?
I think you can get on Netflix or no.
Oh, I don't know. It's really good.
Somewhere.
Anyway, so basically it was all about deception detection. And I found out that Dr. Paul Ekman, he did this whole study, and he studied different people groups, and he even went into Papua New Guinea. He found the most remote people groups that were the less influenced by media and by other cultures. And he was studying people all over the world, right? And he studied emotions and expressions and things like that. And he discovered the whole concept of micro expressions.
Okay, what is that?
So a micro expression is a facial expression that occurs within a fraction of a second. Okay. So a micro expression happens like that. And it's an involuntary emotional leakage is what it is. And it exposes—
emotional leakage. I'm having an emotional leakage.
And it exposes a person's true emotions. So if you think, I am so angry and I'm so frustrated and upset because this team member of mine completely blew it, but I'm not going to let them know it because I need to, I don't want to get sued or whatever.
I don't want to throw up.
Honestly, it shows on your face. They're called micro expressions, and people see them. And what he did is he videotaped people and then basically put it in slow motion, and you could see how the expression came across their face, and they didn't even know it. And so, but what's fascinating is, so he helped create this show, Lie to Me, and he was on there helping them with each of the different episodes and the concepts. But he took this information and he helped create the courses for TSA. He helped create the courses for the FBI, for law enforcement, for the CIA, all about deception detection. Yeah. And really, because even though you think, okay, so I'm not swearing up and down at my direct report, and I'm not stomping my feet, and I'm not, physically shaking, and my face is not red. So they don't know that I'm super upset with them. It's not true.
Yep.
And so if you can't regulate your emotions internally to not even get to the point where you are just flaming mad, but you're not showing it, you actually are showing it, and they feel it and they know it. And the reason we don't want to do that, we don't want you to just hold it all in, because it's still going to come out.
Because it's energy. Emotions are energy.
And it still comes out, and those micro expressions come out. And the CIA, the FBI, the law enforcement, TSA, they can all see it. The show Lie to Me, it was all about just, having a conversation with somebody and knowing when that individual wasn't telling the truth, or maybe when they were angry or frustrated or irritated. You could just tell, you could feel that something was going on. And the reason we're dealing with the whole concept of the emotional regulator is we want faster, we want more efficient, we want logical solutions. So you don't shut down, and so you don't get flustered, right? Yeah. And also we want to save time and energy, because when you are cleaning up the emotional shrapnel that you have left behind by this explosion that has maybe actually happened or just seeped out of your face, because you can have emotional shrapnel that comes from micro expressions, especially when you have people that are maybe very sensitive to those kind of things.
Well, Lisa, and it's why we created Emotionally Intelligent. It's really to save time and save money. I mean, our clients have said, and the people that have went through the course, they've actually said this saves so much time, and really has saved us so much money, really helped our budgets, because our team can emotionally regulate. They can go through some of these steps, and we're going to give you like a tiny piece of it, but there's a lot more inside of the course. So we'll put a link to that so that you can have it. And Lisa, as you're kind of talking about this, I remember this time, it was just fascinating, is Melissa, when she was back living, our daughter was, at the house, and this is probably 5 or 6, 7 years ago, and she came to the kitchen and she just looked at me, she goes, "Dad, why are you so angry?" And I was like, "I'm not angry." And she says, "Well, you have angry eyes." And I was like, "Fine, I'm angry."
Yeah, she perceived it, and you weren't acting out, you weren't saying anything. She could see it in your eyes.
Yeah, and so the reality is that we think we're masking it, and it's energy, and when you have this energy, you got to do something with it. And even this is great, like in therapy. I remember, when my dad passed, some of the best advice that I got was like, just feel the feels, right? It's like, just if you feel that sadness and you feel like, just go ahead and just cry at those times, right? Instead of just trying to hold it out, because it's got to go somewhere. It's going to come out. And it's almost like this whole idea of it's going to go somewhere. And so you got to do something with it. So almost like looking at energy or looking at emotions as energy, and looking at it as information. They're almost like signals. Right? They inform us of these internal states. It almost like tells us our internal reaction to an external environment. Right? And this is where we got to own our own stuff and own our own feelings. I feel that nobody makes me feel anything. Right? And so I have this external environment, but how I perceive that external environment, it determines my emotional state, right? Is it a friend or is it a foe? Right? Do I see it as an attack, or do I just see it as information? Right? Think about this. This is where people get really caught up. We've seen in organizations where people get the feedback, but they don't see it as information. They don't perceive it as information. They perceive it as a threat.
Well, because typically anytime we have a force that is exerted upon us, we first have an emotional response to it.
Right.
And so we have that emotional response. And so if it's feedback, you're going to have a happy, sad, there's 6 or 7 base emotions that the neuroscientists have kind of discovered.
Right.
And that you're going to have that emotion first, and then you're going to have a response to it, even if you don't realize you have it.
Yeah. And so this is where it's like, feedback should feed. But if I look at it as a threat, I'm going to have this emotional experience to it. And really, when you think about it, emotions, they provide information about our preferences, right? Only you know your preferences, about your values, and about your priorities. It's this information, right? We have certain emotional responses about our kids because just the priority that they are, right? Our relationship together, we have certain emotional responses because of the priority where maybe if it was a team member or just a teller at the bank, it would look totally different. It's because of like those priorities. And when you think about emotion, I tell people all the time, in fact, I just did this workshop in San Diego or Temecula actually, where I talked about like emotion. Emotion drives motion, emotion, right? And it drives your actions, right? So it can kind of propel you if you know, which means even sometimes things that we perceive as negative emotions or energy, but you just use them to propel you. Mm-hmm. You don't use them to stop you, use them to propel you, and they become actually useful, not useless. But how many times do we like experience these things and they sort of become useless because we don't know what to do with it?
Right.
We don't know how to respond to it. And so almost look at it as emotions are just data. They're just providing you data to help you adapt, to help you survive, and really help you thrive in any environment. And they almost become your friend, not your foe.
Absolutely. And so what you do with this data is you use this data to create awareness.
Okay.
Because why do we want to create awareness? We create awareness because awareness provides choice. It allows us for choice. When we're not aware of something, then we have no choice over it. For most people, emotions, they're out of your conscious control. Mm-hmm. Until you work on it. And they simply happen to us. And so when you're unaware of your emotions and they're out of your conscious control and they simply happen to you, you have no choice over them and you have no power over them. But when you begin to establish awareness on your emotions, you get that choice back and you get that power back and you can decide, this is what I want to do with this external force that has happened to me.
Yeah, Lisa, I love like kind of what Dr. John Townsend, he said about this is that, a lot of times like people will come to him and say, well, I don't have any emotions. I just don't have any emotions. And he has this statement where he says, no, you have them. You just don't have access to them.
Right.
And the reality is that you have these emotions. You just might not have access to them. And we want to help you access them to use them for your good, to kind of drive you forward.
Absolutely. So this was also a John Townsend concept. And
Love that guy. We got to meet that guy.
Yeah, he's so
Hey, if
smart.
you know that guy, introduce us to that guy.
But he talked about the concept of a backpack. Yeah. And it's like you have them, mm-hmm. you just don't know that you have them. And so with our culture, a lot of times women are more allowed to have or express or feel their emotions and men mm-hmm. are less allowed. It's the way our culture has developed, and it actually puts men at a disadvantage because for anyone that has their emotions but they aren't aware of them, it's like you're wearing a backpack and you're driving down the road and there's incredible rush hour traffic and you start to feel angry. Well, you're not really allowed to have an emotional burst on it. So you stick that anger in your backpack and you put that weight of it in your backpack and then you get to work and the alarms, you're trying to turn the alarm off and it's not working and the alarm it's just not functioning correctly and somebody's going to have to call and that's another frustration. And, you can't hit the wall or scream or whatever and you don't even recognize that you've got something going on. Mm-hmm. So you take that and you stick it in your backpack and then you get a call from your wife. Well, your daughter just got an amazing award at school and it's just very exciting for her. Well, there's so much happiness and joy there, but you don't really have time to express that emotion or even think about it or feel about how proud you are. So you just stick it in your backpack. Well, you get 5, 10, 20 instances, 20 pounds in your backpack, and that's okay. But if you never go through the process of being able to actually think, oh, wow, that really frustrates me, or man, I am so excited and proud and let's celebrate. Or a chance to express them or talk about them or share them. Exactly. So you're going through the day and then by the end of the day and by the next day, you've got a couple 100 pounds worth of emotions that are in your backpack. And at some point, they are going to come out. We just don't necessarily want to know what's going to happen when the seam at the bottom of your backpack splits and they all come tumbling down. And there's going to be casualties from that emotional split out. And that's what you don't want to have happen. And that's essentially what goes on when you're not aware of your emotions and you don't have access to them. You're piling them in it and they're going to come out either in negative behaviors in alcohol and drugs, or in things like explosive anger, or they can also come out in depression. And so all of these things, that's when you're not aware of your emotions, that's what happens. And it's this backpack.
Well, Lisa, it's almost like this, Lisa. Like, say I have like just 10 pounds in my backpack. I can take it off and throw it to you. You can catch it, right? But if I'm carrying like 200 pounds and I come and I just throw 200 pounds on you, right? It totally crushes you.
Yeah.
And but how many times do we do that? Like with team members, like we've had, a week's worth of emotion or our spouse or our kids or the people in our lives. And we just kind of throw this 300-pound backpack on you, right? Well, you can catch a 5-pound, right? You can catch that, but man, 300 pounds, that's going to crush you.
Absolutely. And if that other person isn't aware,
right.
or if you're not even aware that you're carrying all this weight and all of a sudden you're losing it, it's pretty difficult. We, in our emotionally intelligent course, we talk about the emotions wheel and just being able to identify there's some base emotions and then kind of branching out from there.
Yeah, we really show you how to process some of those in that course, which is people found really helpful.
Absolutely, and there's this tool that we've even been using, and it deals with some of the base emotions, and it's a matter of stopping and sitting down in the minute and being like, okay, I feel angry because I feel shame because I feel joy because I feel guilt because, and just being able to sit down and think, okay, right now, how can I access these emotions, and beginning every single day to go through and practice that. And that's been fascinating. And that's been kind of a cool little tool that we heard from Connection Codes.
Yeah, so we'll put a link to Connection Codes because that's been really helpful. We want you to have that.
And it's a way to it's essentially a way to train ourselves to have access to our emotions at any moment, rather than just throwing them in our backpack. And because when you realize, oh yeah, I'm feeling kind of sad right now, then I don't have to put it in my backpack.
Well, and I think the key, Lisa, is that, it helps us stop judging our emotions, right? Because a lot of times, I shouldn't feel sad. Well, I shouldn't feel angry. Angry is bad, right? But no, I feel this way. This happened, and I feel that way, and just using it as information.
Right.
So, my anger is just information. It's just telling me something. My sadness, it's information that's just telling myself. But if I use it as like a judgment about, I shouldn't or should, it's like you just are.
Right.
And just sort of to your point, it's like sometimes you can't stop these emotions. They're just going to come, and stop judging them and just be aware. And then actually, how can I use that anger in a positive way? It's like, how can I use that sadness to go create something different? How can I use that loneliness that I feel and go create something? And you almost like, you take back control. It's like you're powerful with your emotions. You're not powerless with your emotions.
Right. We don't judge our emotions, and we don't should or shouldn't our emotions. We have our emotions because we're human. And so there's not a should or a shouldn't, because it's not that you should or shouldn't be human. You just are human. So therefore you do have the emotions, and that's okay.
Yeah. So stop shoulding on yourself. Stop shoulding. Okay. You just walk around shoulding. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't. Just stop the shoulds.
I shouldn't feel this way. You do feel that way because you are human, and you're in this situation.
Okay. Can we get to the emotional yardstick?
Please, because this is fascinating.
Okay.
We thank our therapist for this.
We do. Okay. So what we want you to think about, and we'll put this tool in the show notes so that you can download it. But we want you to think about a yardstick. Right? So you have this long, like 3-foot yardstick, and we want you to think at one end of the stick is a 1, right? The number 1, and at the other end of the yardstick is 100. It's called 1 to 100. Now, this is a tool that you can use to really help you respond correctly, manage your response, own your response, and really move forward faster.
Not to respond correctly, but to respond appropriately.
Thank you. Right. To respond appropriately, right? Because one of the worst things you can do is over-respond. And how many times does that happen? So what we have discovered, Lisa, is that there are 4 times in life that people should over-respond.
And what is an over-response?
An over-response is when, I'm 5 minutes late for an appointment. I go, oh my God, I can't believe I'm so fine. Right? And I just treat it like it's something bigger than what it really is.
Okay.
And the challenge is that we say things like, well, calm down, or it's not that big of a deal. Which those are very unhelpful phrases.
Right.
People don't know what to do with it. So we're going to show you what to do with it and stop using those kind of phrases. Hey, just calm down, or hey, it's not that big of a deal. So we want you to think of yardstick 1 to 100. Okay, this long yardstick. And I want you to think about there are 4 times in life where you overrespond. So we're going to give you sort of a pass. If these 4 things happen, you absolutely can overrespond.
Please overrespond.
Please overrespond, right? So the first one is it bleeding? Okay, so if it's bleeding, okay, you need to overrespond. Is it not breathing? If it's not breathing,
please overrespond.
Please overrespond, right? Is it on fire? If it's on fire, oh my gosh, please overrespond. Or is it underwater?
And right. It's not supposed to be.
It's not supposed to be underwater.
If it's a fish, please leave it underwater.
Right. But if it's your house and it's underwater, if it's your car and it's underwater, please overrespond. Okay. But everything else in life, every experience, you just have to have the appropriate response. So we're going to ask you a question, and we just want you to think about the answer to this. Okay. And it's a personal answer to everybody, for everybody, is I want you to think about what is the worst thing in your life that has ever happened to you. Okay, just kind of get that in your mind. It could be the death of a spouse or death of a parent. It could be a divorce. It could be, an operation, a trauma. It just multiple things. So Lisa, you got that? We're not going to.
Got it.
Okay, and I got mine. Okay, so we got that. So think 1 to 100. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Moving forward for the rest of your life, whatever you thought about that experience is your 100. Okay, that's your 100. So now what I want you to do is I want you to put every experience moving forward on the yardstick, 1 to 100. And where does it go? Oh, so I was 5 minutes late for an appointment. Oh, where's it go? What's the number? I forgot to send that email. Where's it go on the number? Oh, my child didn't do the dishes. Where's it go on the number? I had a team member, they were late on an assignment. Where's it go on the yardstick? And here's what I've discovered, Lisa, is almost everything in my life, every experience, usually falls below a 20. Mm-hmm. In fact, a lot of them fall below a 10. I would say 60% probably below a 10, probably 95% below 20. But the problem is, Lisa, when it's really a 10, but I treat it like an 80.
Right.
Right? That's the problem. This is called the emotional yardstick. And what we want you to do is we simply want you just to start to score every experience on the yardstick and just measure your response. Because the challenge is when we over-respond, or when we can't, leaders that over-respond are not trusted. They're just not, right? Because people don't know how to take you. You could blow up one day, you could not blow up. They don't know. And so trust really gets eroded this way.
And you tend to over-respond, and you tend to go to 80 when it should be a 20 because your backpack is too full.
Right.
Because you haven't identified your previous situations and your previous emotions when these different things happened. And so when you over-respond and then you over-respond and over-respond, you're filling up your backpack with these emotions. And then at some point it comes out.
Right. And the regulator question is simply, what's the number? Now, Lisa, what people don't know, and we'll kind of give a little super secret, is in all of our offices, we have signs that basically say, what's the number? Right? What's the number? Because I tend to over-respond at times, right? It is what it is. And so just having that visual, what's the number, helped me regulate my own emotions and respond appropriately. Now, here's a secret. If you're leading a team, teach this concept to your team. We would love for you to teach this concept. We're going to have, the tool will be there to download, so you'll have that tool for yourself. But teach it to your team, because simply this question, hey, what's the number? What's the number? It helps them regulate and we have had large, even entire hospital systems take this idea, teach it throughout their whole teams, and they have seen, like their nursing staff, they have seen incredible productivity and such better results and better outcomes for patients and families when nurses have learned to respond correctly.
Respond appropriately.
Respond appropriately. Thank you. Yeah. And so learning to measure the response, it's just a self-regulating tool.
Absolutely. And part of that too is we need to regulate our emotions, and we also need to not regulate other people's emotions.
Okay, now what do you mean by that?
Okay, so when I'm regulating your emotions, for instance, I see that you're frustrated, I see that you're irritated, I see that something's going on, and so I am trying to adjust the environment within my control to help augment this emotional response that you're having.
Yep.
So I can see that you're frustrated. So a very typical response would be, Dad comes home from work and he's angry and he's frustrated and he's irritated and the kids are home and Mom's like, okay, kids, Dad's had a bad day. Nobody talk to him. Everybody be quiet. Everybody go out of the room. Just don't say anything to him. Leave him alone. And it's setting up a whole environment to help that person regulate their emotions. Or boss is coming in, okay, and there's this text message thread that goes through the office. The boss is having a bad day. Keep your head slow. Okay.
Right.
That is everyone in the office regulating the boss's emotions because the boss does not have his own emotions regulated. And when that thread goes through, okay, he's having a bad day, watch out because you don't want to get exploded on. That is someone else regulating another person's emotions. And we don't want to do that. We want to learn how to regulate our own emotions because when I try to regulate, say, Dennis, your emotions, I close myself off and you're closed off. And you don't know, all of a sudden I'm reacting differently to you. Now you're already doing your best to keep your stuff together, right?
Yep.
But then all of a sudden I'm responding differently to you than I normally would. If you're just highly emotionally charged, maybe you just need to be able to say, hey, I just really had a terrible day today and you need to let me know, hey, I need to go pound the pavement and go on a run or something like that. And I'm like, okay, great. But when I try to regulate your emotions, then I try to control the situation. And all that does is that helps ramp it up. And it also closes us off from each other.
And then we're no longer collaborative.
And then we're not collaborative. And then we don't know how to respond to each other because we don't know what actually is going on. And it ends up being a dog chasing his tail. So you're getting ready to blow up. So I'm going to try to regulate that and try to help keep you from blowing up. And then you all of a sudden are coming into a situation where it's like, she's acting really weird to me and I just don't know how to respond. And then I feel that. And I'm like, okay, now he's being weird to me. And so basically
it's a crazy cycle.
It's a crazy cycle. And we close ourselves off because, you don't know how to respond to me at all because you can tell that I'm a little bit tense and I'm not really sure, I'm insecure or I'm unsure, and then you don't know how to respond. And so it's easiest just to kind of put that wall up.
And it's why we really dived into a lot of this in Emotionally Intelligent because of all of that emotional waste. Mm-hmm. How much time is burned, how much energy, and how many opportunities are lost because we're in that emotional waste. It's why that particular course is so valuable and so helpful to people. And I think sometimes, Lisa, this whole idea of like, hey, your feelings are your feelings, and I am not responsible.
I am not, as the boss, I'm not responsible for your feelings.
No.
And you're having a tough day and you're pretty upset or angry or actually before we even went on the podcast, I walked down the hall all of a sudden I see you on the phone with a team member and I can just tell right away. I'm like,
I was a little
okay,
angry.
We don't have a good juju going on here. Yeah. I mean, I could see, and I'm like, what is going on? And because when we do this podcast, this is something that's a creative thing for us. And it's actually a fun thing. Yeah. And all of a sudden that energy is just sucked right out.
All of a sudden, all the creativity got sucked out right before we got in the air.
And I see the micro expression going on, even though you're not acting out of it all. And the minute, and I see it right away. And so rather than me trying to regulate your emotions and me like, tiptoeing around you and not sure and it just sucking the energy out of the room, I'm like, hey, what's going on? Because I can tell that there's a shift.
Yeah. And Lisa, and what I did is I just thought, okay, well, what's the number? And really it was like a 3. It was a 3 that I was treating like a 50, right? For whatever reason, it just triggered me in that place. And it's where I took a 3 and I treated it like a 50. But just having that question, you asked me and it brought awareness. And I said, okay, Dennis, what's the number? I said 3. And then boom, and you notice how the atmosphere just changed?
Yeah.
And this whole idea of really regulating your emotions, Lisa, think about it. It helps people, like, it's almost like an anti-fragile sort of medication. Right? How many people like, I've got to manage your emotions, I got to regulate, and it's, oh, you're very fragile. I can't. And really realizing like when I can like regulate myself, I become anti-fragile. And how many people like in our culture today, we're just super fragile because, people can't regulate their own emotions. They blow up and, well, gosh, it was really a 3 and you just treated it like a 50. And then I feel like I have to kind of manage you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important to think about, like, okay, your feelings are your feelings. Now, here, let's just kind of say this, because I am great with team members being angry, frustrated, irritated, annoyed. But like, I am totally happy, right? I'm great with any emotion. But what I'm not cool with are the behaviors out of that, right? It's like you can be
negative behaviors.
Right. It's like you can be angry, but you can't gossip. You can't complain. Right? You can't whine. You can't
be vindictive.
Can't be vindictive, right? Can't be out for revenge. But I'm okay with you being irritated. That's okay. Right? And I'm not going to try to change your irritation. Your irritation is your irritation. But we do as leaders have to sort of create these standards of behavior. Right? We talked about another podcast episode that I'm okay with team members being aggravated because it just means you care. But I'm not cool with you, complaining. So you can be aggravated but not complain.
And there's a difference between complaining and addressing something that you're aggravated about. Those are completely different. You can be, I'm kind of irritated or aggravated or annoyed by this particular thing, but complaining would be addressing it and then bringing it up and it not being productive and proactive toward a goal.
Yeah, and I think the last thing, Lisa, I want to cover is as we continue to like walk through life, I've really worked on scoring every experience, right? Just sort of putting it on the regulator and just scoring, kind of reflecting on my thoughts, my feelings, and my behaviors, because then you start to see patterns for your personal and professional triggers, because we all have them, right? I treated this like a 50 and it was really a 5. Okay, let me kind of reflect back on it. And almost as you continue to go throughout your day is like continue to access activity, sort of assess what activities, relationships, environments they contribute positively or negative to my well-being, right? So that I actually use the past to create a bigger future. Mm-hmm. Most people don't know what to do with their experiences. Part of the purpose of an experience is to create a better future for yourself. Even as you go through negative, it's like, well, what did I learn? How did I score it? Well, why did I score it that way? Well, what was going on in me? Well, how do if I have this experience again, how do I make it a different score? Mm-hmm. And just getting really good at that, because recognizing what brings you joy, stress, sadness, it really helps you manage your emotional responses, right? There are certain things I already know I don't like, but I'm going to step in and do it because at this time, I'm the only one who can do it. Right, Lisa, for example, literally us making our bed, when we have to like change the duvet, like, gosh, that just irritates me. Right. And as I'm doing it, I thought, I really don't like this. Right. This is not enjoyable, but not to like treat it like a 50. Okay, well, what's the number? Well, it's really like a 5. So let's treat it like a 5. But then also asking myself, okay, moving forward, how could I make that enjoyable? What would need to be true to make that enjoyable? Or could I delegate it to somebody else? Could I have somebody else do that for me? And you go through these experiences and you score them to make them better in the future.
And along with that too, like for me, I mean, I love switching out the duvet cover? Not necessarily. Yeah. Do I mind it? I mean, it's something that has to be done. But what I love is I love the result of it. Yeah. I love having it switched out. I love that feel. Yeah. And so sometimes when you've got a word and different syllables of the word are stressed, right? Yeah. If you change this where the stress is on that syllable and how you say it, sometimes it changes an English word into a French word. It completely changes the word, and sometimes it can change the meaning. I mean, like or you can change just something simple like that. Well, when I change the meaning of a duvet cover, switching out from something of, this just super irritates me to, I absolutely love the feel of a new duvet cover. Yeah. Then it completely changes the meaning of it.
So, Lisa, for me, I've loved this topic. I mean, this emotional regulator, the emotional yardstick has been really, I think, a real key in my life of me just self-regulating and really, I feel more powerful, right? I really walk through life feeling a lot more powerful because I actually have a tool.
because awareness brings choice.
It really does.
And it allows you to choose and allows you to have that power.
Right. And so like I said, I'm not subject to my emotions. I'm like, they're just information, and I'm just going to use that information to make my life better and better. And so I think that's my takeaway. What about you? What was a key takeaway for you?
How much I really enjoyed the show Lie to Me. And actually,
really, that was a takeaway?
Well, because it reminded me of the whole, I kind of geek out on the whole idea of micro expressions and deception detection and all of those things, because those are all components of what's going on inside that you can't see.
Well, you know what's fascinating, Lisa, and I think this is not true across the board, but I think this is where females have such an advantage over males. And it's not totally true, but here's what I'm going to say, and you might kind of contradict it a little bit. But because you have more access to your emotions, you're more intuitive. Like at least between you and I, you're the more intuitive one than I am.
Right.
Because you probably have better access at times than I do. And I love that gift about you. Like, I love just how intuitive you are. And I want to be more intuitive. And I think part of the key of being more intuitive is continuing to get more access to those emotions, because it goes back to those micro expressions. You're aware of it with you, so you read it and you pick it up in other people.
Right. So I'm just going to say, I don't think it's necessarily a male-female thing. Now our culture and our society has steered us down each of those paths.
Right.
So because it hasn't necessarily been the acceptable thing for a male to express his emotions. It's been more acceptable and more just the norm for a man to be stoic and then for a woman to be emotional. Yeah. Now, is it okay for a woman to be all over emotional? No. Is it okay for a man to be all over stoic? No. And so culture has kind of driven us that way. Yeah. But I think there are different personalities. I mean, like, for instance, like with Working Genius. Mm-hmm. Working Genius, there are different aspects of Working Genius. Now, one of the geniuses is discernment, which is I'm very high discernment. And with that, it's fascinating because that means I see those things and I notice those things. And you can be a man and be high discernment. And so I get the concept, but I don't think it's necessarily a male-female thing. And that's one of those things that we want to bring up is emotional regulation is not a male-female thing. And being able to be aware or even have access to your emotions is not a male-female thing. It's a learned skill.
That's
and you can learn it whether you are male or female or whether you have maybe high levels of discernment or intuition or not. I mean, for anything, math or science, anything. Like my science, I'm right up there. I mean, I get into sciencey things and I love it. Now, Dennis, you're more the math guy. I mean, you get into math and you're like way, way higher up, and you're in tune to those things. I am not, and I will never be. I will only be so good at it. But it's the same with emotions and being aware or even having access to them. But it's important to have access because I don't care if you're a CEO or an educator or a nurse. When we're around people and we're dealing with people, it's just part of being human and being able to know what to do with our emotions and recognize that we have emotions and they have emotions, because we want to regulate ourselves. We don't want to regulate other people.
Yeah, that's perfect. So if you want to work on like increasing your intuitiveness, right, and being more intuitive, that's why we created the course. We'll put a link there. And really, when you're more intuitive, you're going to make better decisions. So if you want to make better decisions, Emotionally Intelligent is the course for you, and you're going to see your leadership and really results with your team just skyrocket. So, Lisa, this has been fun, and we'll see you next time on the Drama Free Living Podcast.